Good afternoon and welcome to our Educational Management 1 exam-based presentation. I must tell you from the outset that this examination-based presentation is based on all 3 trimesters. It means it covers the April examination, August examination, as well as the November supplementary examination. So I hope that you will listen this afternoon and take cognizance of what I'm going to say. First of all, we look at the characteristics of management. That means you will need to consult your study guide and familiarize yourself with what are the characteristics of management that are outlined in your teachings, in your study guide. Let me start by saying, when you have your study guide, you need to familiarize yourself with the following. Read all the learning outcomes in the unit. That means all the unit, not necessarily a certain unit, but all the unit. You need to familiarize yourself. And after you have completed the unit, you should be able to master all the learning outcomes. So in other words, every module that you study comprises of learning outcomes, and you need to familiarize yourself with all the learning outcomes. The learning outcomes are actually the objectives that guides you how far you need to study that particular subject. You must bear in mind that we as tutors, we are not allowed to give you a scope of the work that is to be covered during examination. You need to study all the units as guided by the learning outcomes. So what I'm doing this afternoon is really not to give you a scope, but it's only to summarize very important aspects that you must pay attention to as you study. I will highlight certain topics that you might find hard to answer, as well as some common mistakes that students tend to do. All right, and then we look at the difference between management and administration. So when you are presented with the questions that deals with the difference between management and administration, it's actually a comparative question. So you need to compare between management and administration. And the best way to do that is to draw a table and look at the subtopics. For example, you compare the difference between management and administration in terms of meaning, in terms of the nature, in terms of the process, in terms of the functions, the skills, the influence, and the level. Again, if you want to know what I'm talking about here, you really need to look at your study guide and see, because it's outlined for you very well, the difference between management and administration based on meaning, nature, process, functions, and skills, influence, as well as the level. Very clearly outlined for you in your study guide. Then again, when we look at the 7 leadership compared to ineffective leadership, that is where they say 7 leadership take you out of the mess, while ineffective leadership draw you out of the mud. So that is very, very clearly outlined in the study guide. So you need to study the difference between 7 leadership, or the comparison between 7 leadership and ineffective leadership. Code of ethics for school managers. School managers are expected to follow certain code of ethics, and you need to study this code of ethics for school managers. Myths around minority learners, or what we call at-risk learners. there are certain perceptions which we call, they are myths. It's not proved, but there are certain perceptions around minority learners, and you need to study what are these myths that are formed around minority learners and describe them. National policy on HIV and AIDS. What does the policy on HIV and AIDS says? So there are many aspects under national policy on HIV and AIDS that you need to familiarize yourself with. And then rights and responsibilities of teachers, or the rights and responsibilities of learners. Every time you come across this topic about rights and responsibilities, you need to distinguish what are the rights and what are the responsibilities. At times it is required from you to match. In other words, when you talk of a right, you need to match what is the responsibility that goes together with that right. That is now for both teachers and learners. You need to know what are the rights and responsibilities. And then the Maslow's theories of motivation. You remember the Maslow triangle of needs. You need to understand very well the Maslow theories of motivation, and you need to understand that in context. For example, in Maslow's theory of motivation, the lower needs must be satisfied first before you can move on to higher needs. Now, what are these lower needs? For example, the basic needs of hunger, shelter, all those needs must be satisfied before you go to the higher needs, which can include self-actualization and so on. So you need to understand in a classroom situation, how can Maslow's theory of motivation be applied? And then the topic on budgeting. That topic is very broad about budgeting. In other words, you can look at budgeting at school level or school-based budgeting. You can look at the expenditures, how the expenditures should be handled in a school situation, and so on. And then school maintenance. School maintenance is also broad. Here you can look at the safety of the school. What is the benefit of having safety at school? And how do you look at the resources? How can you maintain the school environment? And what are the benefits of this school maintenance? And then another topic also is emergency evacuation. In case of emergency, what is the school policy? Or what is expected from all the teachers and learners to do in case of emergency? Emergency drills and so on. Those are topics that you can explore as you read through your study guide. Here we go again about the Maslow hierarchy of needs. There you have the physiological needs, which are actually at the bottom of the pyramid, which means those are the basic needs. Hunger must be satisfied. Shelter, you need to have shelter. And then the next level is the safety needs, and then the social needs, the esteem needs, and then the self-actualization needs. As I said before, the lower needs, which are the physiological needs, hunger, shelter, and so on, must be satisfied before you go to the next level, and then the next level, and then the next level again. Now this triangle, or these needs, can be contextualized. So the question might not only ask you to name the physiological needs, but it might take you back to the classroom situation where if you sit with a child in your class, for example, and this child is hungry, what are you going to do to satisfy the physiological needs in that child? So you need to be very practical and thinking outside the box in order to be able to answer this question. And then the characteristics of arts, that one is very straightforward. It is in your study guide. The different characteristics of art, you need to know them. Your question might also look at principal's responsibility for staff's welfare, their development and management. So the principal's responsibility for staff's welfare, the principal has the responsibility to look after the staff, and they also have the responsibility to develop the staff and also to manage the staff. Again, we can look at the computer centers. Computer centers, there are certain tips that you can use in order to manage the computer centers effectively. Look at those tips in the computer center. And then the characteristics of the gestalt or the vision or new professionalism. Yeah, that is the characteristics that is also outlined in your study guide that you can study. The roles and responsibilities of the head of department, those roles and responsibilities or roles and responsibilities are outlined according to different aspects in education. For example, as related to the curriculum and other aspects. Parental involvement, so there are certain benefits related to parental involvement. It could relate parental involvement as related to the teachers, parental involvement as related to children, and so on. So those parental involvement are also very well outlined in your study guide, and you need to familiarize yourself with that. Hygiene at school is very important, and there are certain conditions that goes with hygiene at school, and you will be asked to discuss hygiene at school. Bullying and other types of violence. Bullying is a concern in many schools, and also some other type of violence. There are certain forms of bullying, and those way of bullying and how to curb bullying at school is what you need to know. And then water management, which is also very important in the Namibian context. How do we manage water at school? And how do we keep our water clean, sanitation, and the hygiene standards that we need to maintain. And then this is a very important graph, or it's a very important table. It says a lot, because here you need to compare the difference between, that word between is wrongly spelled, the difference between management and administration. Now when you look at the table itself, on the right side of the figure you will see top level management, and then middle level management, lower level management, as related to administration and management, as you can see inside the box. Now let us look at the level of top level management in terms of administration. When you look at the length of this box as divided by this line, you will see that this level is higher than the lower level here. So when we look at the top level management, we can say that top level management in terms of administration, there is much time that is allotted to top level management, but there is less amount of time that is given to management. So we are comparing administration and management. When we look at the top level, you see that the top level, there is much that is allocated in terms of administration, but when you look at management, there is less time that is allocated at the top level management. That means top level is more concerned with administration as compared to management. Let us look at middle level management. Middle level management, when you look at the amount of time administration compared to management, you will see that it is equal. It is equal amount of time for administration and equal amount of time for management. That means the middle level management cadre is actually allotting equal time to administration and management. But at the lower level management is exactly the opposite of the top level management. So the lower level management staff is more concerned with management. Look at the amount of time that is allocated to management and look at the little time that is allocated to administration. So in summary, it means top level management gives more time to administration. Middle level management is equal in terms of administration and management. Lower level management gives more time to management compared to administration. That's what it means. So now you will need to describe, as I have just said to you, how the difference between management and administration is illustrated by this table. It is further explained in your study guide. And then school management, we'll look also at the generic function of school management, which we'll call POLC. POLC stands for P for planning, O for organizing, L for leading, and C for control. Those are generic management of school management: planning, organizing, leading, and control. In your study guide, you will also come upon this theory, which we call the Fromm's Y expectancy theory, where you will need to analyze the theory and explain what does the theory mean. As you can see the facts box, the effort leading to performance, leading to outcome, it gives motivation. So in other words, if the performance or the outcome is related to the performance, which is related to the effort that you put, it will lead to motivation. Loosely stated, it means if the worker is paid according to the effort that he or she put in the work, it will lead to positive outcome, and positive outcome will lead to motivation. So the more you are paid very well for the effort that you put in, the more you become motivated and the more you have a positive output. Ethical responsibility of educational manager, the school culture, very important to look at the role that the school culture plays in education. So in educational management, you can make use of the school culture in order to turn around effective management. The comparison between formal and informal organization. So in other words, here we look at the difference between formal and informal organization. And then issues that are related to policy debate. So if you have to devise or if you have to write a policy debate, what are the issues that you are going to look at? An example is also given in the study guide in terms of the issues that you can look at which can influence policy debate. School safe environment, in other words, why is school safe environment very important? And what are you going to do about it? And that will bring us to the end of the presentation. of educational management. One, as I told you before, this presentation covers all the 3 trimesters for 2018. So you will need to keep this presentation very close, because every trimester before you write examination, you will need to go through them. There is no way that we are going to repeat presentation term by term. All the issues that are related to presentations of the 3 terms are discussed in this kind of presentation. Thank you very much.